you have a clear MRI scan but still have MS?
Yes, you can. The reason I'm saying that is because I assume the MRI is referring to the brain.
Okay.
Because sometimes you can have lesions in the spinal cord not picked up on brain scan. Occasionally we have a small number of people where the brain and the spinal cord MRI is normal. The reason for that is lesions can cause symptoms that are microscopic, in other words, not picked up by the MRI of the brain. So the average lesion that's picked up with the new scanners is about 4 millimeters or larger. Okay. So some people could have tiny lesions causing symptoms or attacks that haven't shown up on the MRI of the brain. I personally would feel uncomfortable making that diagnosis without other evidence, like a lumbar puncture with spinal fluid analysis or electrical tests as well to support the diagnosis. Because you don't really want to rush into a diagnosis in somebody and get it wrong. Because once you've got a label of MS, it affects your life forever. You can't get insurance policies, it affects employment prospects, it changes your whole standing in the world. So my personal opinion is if somebody's got normal MRI imaging, okay, and they're at high risk of getting MS, I'd rather say to them, let's just wait 6 to 12 months. And if you have got MS, it will almost certainly declare itself, another attack or something like that. So the MRI, you can have a normal MRI, but it's unusual. It's less than 2.5% of patients. So it's less than 1 in 40 people will have, at the beginning of the disease, a normal MRI.
Okay. Why do relapses sometimes take months and months to show any sign of remission, and why do people often never recover that much from them?
Well, what causes a relapse, first of all? So what causes a relapse is an inflammatory lesion, an MS lesion, in a particular neuronal pathway. So let's say it's in the pathway that controls the motor symptoms, walking, for example. So those inflammatory lesions actually damage the nerve fibers. They cut them and some of them die. So the recovery mechanism then is quite complicated. What happens is the damaged nerve fibers have to recover or repair themselves, or existing nerve fibers have to put out what we call sprouting. They have to grow out another root, for example, to take over that function. That can take months, even up to years to occur. Right. So the mechanisms of recovery take ages, so up to 2 years. So this is why I always tell people that they shouldn't necessarily expect to recover from a relapse very quickly. It could take months or years. And also, if the damage is severe, there may not be full recovery. That's why some people are left behind with some disability, because the recovery is incomplete. Okay.
And if people take steroids to get over relapses, would it make a difference how quickly into the relapse they took the steroids as to how quickly they'd possibly recover?
Well, they do recover quicker, but they don't. The final outcome is the same. Whether or not you have steroids or not makes no difference to the final outcome. What it does do, it speeds up the time to recovery. And we think the reason for that is around an acute or a new MS lesion, there's lots of swelling because there's inflammation, and the steroids reduce the swelling, which allows some of the nerve fibers to start functioning earlier. So I think people with MS need to be aware that steroids doesn't affect the final outcome. It just means you get to the final outcome a few weeks, literally 2 to 3 weeks earlier. Okay. Which is why I try not to use steroids.
Really?
Well, the reason is there are complications attached to steroids, and some of those complications can be severe and irreversible. And one of the complications is a condition called AVN, avascular necrosis, where the blood vessel supplying the hip joint gets blocked and the hip joint dies. And the only treatment for that is to have a hip replacement, so that's a serious complication of steroids. And I've had a few of my patients with that. And because of that, I would rather them not have that complication. So I try and avoid steroids. But obviously, if the relapse is very severe and disabling or associated with a lot of pain, the risk-benefit switches when you get off of steroids.
Okay.